Yeah, but I did a quick study on this. What turned out, I call it the Fatalism Contagion. There's a book called The Memoirs of Extraordinary Popular Delusions by a guy named Charles Mackay. No relation that I know of, Mackay.
Sucks to be him.
You work with the mentally ill. What can I say?
That's right.
What does he think about the NFL? What does he think?
If he's smart, he doesn't. But I just was trying to figure out, where do we come up with this climate change contagion where we all agree that typically the contagion of fatalism is about a 10-year plan. You're going to die in about 10 to 12 years. OAC was 12. So I went to study to find out, when did we decide the world was going to end? And pretty much so, according to my recent studies, it started during the plague, about 1345 to 1350, when the plague killed 2/3 of everybody in the known world. The other third,
the important part.
Well, the European world.
Sure, David, ruin my
repeating yourself.
The fact is, nearly everybody. This guy's from London, so almost everything he's doing is European. But yeah, a lot.
Well, they're
of
smart. They got British accents.
Two of the angles.
Weren't they the ones fudging the ClimateGate numbers?
This is a really long story, and if you guys,
I'm sorry. Are you interrupting us?
Go ahead. Fine.
I'm trying to be talented. I'm just a host. What the hell am I doing here? But just real quickly.
Yes. No, go.
The end of the world's going to happen if I don't get this story out. But it turns out that all these stories, like Chicken Little and these things, have their roots in the 1345, 1350 plague. It became rational thinking that 2/3 of everybody we know is dead. This is probably it. And then even some of the Christian, the end is near, added some of that. They construed their exegesis and threw some of that in there. That helped fuel it up. But just real quickly, some numbers. June 1523 was our first consensus prediction. Everybody came together, and that is the soothsayers and the astrologers and such, and they decided that February 1524, the Thames River would flood London, wiping out 10,000 homes. In January of 1524, 20,000 people fled London based on the doomsday predictions.
How many lives were saved?
And created. But the people that had sold the doomsday predictions, instead of being in trouble, they made the very clever case that they were only off by one number, and it was really not
1,000.
No, just 100. 15, 20, like Al Gore. I was just off by 100 years. Just one single digit. But again, 1628, there was a comet. The plague broke out in Milan. They blamed it on the comet. 1630. Another thing that happens with these contagions is people plant seeds. As far back as 1230, there were things said about the poisoning of Milan. Well, in 1630, when the plague hit, they all went, aha, that seed finally came true. And
who's the prophet that everybody goes back to? Nostradamus.
Terrible.
And now, have you ever heard of Mother Shipton? Okay, Mother Shipton is a gal.
Oh, yes.
She was a soothsayer, born 1488, lived till 1561. She had famous predictions about London burning to ashes. And during 1666...
Happened a couple of times.
She was right a couple times.
On.
When you make everything out of wood and thatched roof, gee, that's not a stretch.
Predicted.
You guys make her job sound easy.
I remember September of 1988, there was a book that took the Christian world by storm called 88 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming Back, sometime between September 11th and September 13th, depending where.
And it's been about 31 years since our Lord and Savior returned.
And,
it's a big deal. Clearly, this is the tribulation.
Let me say this, with all respect to, eschatology, and one day Jesus will return. I mean, I believe that. But I remember, as a young associate pastor at church in Minneapolis, sitting in the senior pastor's office, and one of the young boys in the youth was in there, and we were talking, and he says, Pastor, I've been hearing people talk about Jesus coming back for more than 2 years now, and he still hasn't come back. Yeah. Now, what's the deal? And Pastor just says, Joey, Jesus come back tonight for you. And you're like, oh, that's true, But I think it has been a tool of activism, whether it's radical political movements or religious movements, and that to stir up this kind of thing, maybe not for true biblical scholarship, but maybe for other reasons.
Well, it's never been for true biblical
Well,
scholarship.
it's in the collective consciousness that the world is ending no matter what. If you're looking at a secular ideology, it's global warming, it's solar flares, it's an asteroid, whatever. And we've seen these cataclysms before, both in science and in religion. You've got this in Islam, this concept of the 13th Imam and the end times. Constantly of clerics saying this time is upon us. Since the inception of Islam and since the inception of Christianity, you had Christian sects saying this is the end time. As a matter of fact, there's not been a Christian or religious generation that I'm aware of since the founding of any of the major religions that has not thought they were living at the end of the age, the end times. Perhaps it's our own consciousness that we are living in our own end of the age because we will die during our lifetime.
Is, the reason I bring up these stories, and ongoing stories, is to show how the contagion works. It lays dormant until the mind, it's like Nicolas Cage. He doesn't really act. You just project whatever you think onto him. So
you take that back.
We just
As Nicholas Coppola. Get his name right.
It's not like so we just wait until so literally documented 1666. London is burning. The Duke of York is there to try to fix it, and people were folding their arms, counting on the fact that Mother Shipton had said 200 years before, well, London's going to burn, so this is going to be it. They just fall into it. 1736, famous wisdom. Let me throw these out real fast. Predicted world destruction starting in London, 1761. February 8th and March 8th, 2 earthquakes happened, and a guy named Bell predicted the world would be destroyed 1761, April 5th. On March 12, 1842, there was a report in the London Saturday Journal among the weak-minded that London will be destroyed by earthquake on 17 March or St. Patrick's Day. And it didn't happen, but it was something pronounced on 1203 by Dr. D, the astrologer. The bottom line is about these prophecies, and this is a quote from this Charles Mackay. These contagions, they have a most pernicious effect upon the mind of the vulgar as they induce to believe in fatalism. It takes away the hope of recovery, the greatest balm in every malady, increased threefold the ravages.
Hercules would say that.
I don't think it's trying to get fatalism. I think it's actually a chronological snobbery that our generation is the most important, or the pinnacle time to live is right now. And
it's like confirmation bias.
If you've ever read some of C.S. Lewis's books, probably some of the least read are things like The Hideous Strength, which was an end times novel as part of a trilogy. And whereas much American religious books about end time, studies, always focus on the United States being where the Antichrist comes from and rises to power and takes over the world through the U.S. government, while C.S. Lewis had a narrative where it was through the British government that the Antichrist comes and takes over.
That's because he was a Brit.
Well, of course, and that's exactly my point.
I think essentially the scripture states that it specifically has to be from that area known as the Holy Roman Empire. It's basically Central Europe, and that's explicitly stated.
Now you're just blowing it for us, But I mean,
go read it. Read something before you have an opinion about it. I guess.
But here's the thing: is there is a fatalism that comes about when you believe this stuff, and it takes it how it comes about or how it manifests itself is in different ways. If you're a tyrannical
climate change alarmist.
A climate change alarmist, then or a cultist, then your fatalism is that this is going to happen. I need to do something about it. Okay,
you're not doing the stuff that I want you to do. No, therefore, you're going to cause the end of the world.
But David's on something. There is even worse fatalism that happens when you realize you've been duped. As Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain once said, it's much easier to fool the people than to convince them they've been fooled.
Right.
Well, absolutely.
Because once you've given everything you've got into this worldview and you find out it's a fraud, so many people commit suicide.
Well, it's amazing how many of them don't ever find it's a fraud, even when there's like a specific date and a hyper-specific chain of events that are supposed to happen. They just keep on moving the goalposts, and it's not surprising to me. This happens in politics. As soon as you defeat a leftist argument, it's like a hydra. Another one. Well, I was never really arguing that.
And I'm trying to remember his name.
It was never about collusion, right? It was all about something else.
Well, it's called cognitive dissonance. Yeah. They just cannot accept that as truth.
Well, I'm trying to remember his name. There was a guy who just within the last 20 years. Said Jesus was going to return, gave the date.
Just one guy?
And no, he actually gave the date. He'd already done it back in the 80s and been wrong. And he said that wasn't a prophecy. That was a mathematical equation that he got.
It was off by 100 years.
But this one was a prophecy, and then he was wrong. And
Bible's not exactly a math book.
But my point is that I've been talking to people, and especially these end of time Christians, who are really stuck on that we're at the end of times and we see all the writings in the sky and this and that and the other thing, that they then will use that as excuse not to do their duty on earth before our law.
Right.
So we have the duty to uphold our law, our Constitution, and Declaration of Independence, our founding principles. We as Americans, that's what we have as duty to our fellow Americans. But they choose to say, well, it's all going to end anyway. It's all hell in a handbasket. And so then they write it off and they say, I'm a praying person. I'm just not going to do anything about it.
Well, this actually ties back into what you were saying about how people will respond to certain threats on certain amendments and not other threats, because there's a contagion of hope as much as there's a contagion of fatalism. Yeah. It's just much easier to get people to do the lazy contagion of faith. It's easier to say it's all going to end one way or the other, so that way I don't have
negative
to
is always sweeter than
and don't be so harsh on these people, because the last person to say the world is ending is always going to be more correct than the person before them. They're getting more and more accurate every time.
I have to say this. Socrates put it well. That
it's like he knows everybody.
Yeah. I know what you were saying isn't true, because I asked Jesus. He's down at the homeless shelter, and he said that Jesus wasn't told me
he was here that day.
Yeah. But no, Socrates said, it takes bravery to seek out truth, because once you accept that it's true, you have to reform your life around that.
You submit to the truth. You don't believe it.
And change is hard for people to do.
Yeah.
And they would rather believe that's a lie, because if it's true, then they, to be an honest person, has to realign their life to conform to it.
Correct.
And when you have invested 40 years of your female life into the concept of feminism, you're not just going to get off of it when you find out it's full of crap.
Well, and essentially everyone agrees. Everyone agrees that first and second wave feminism just about. I mean, everybody agrees. It's the third wave feminism that people don't agree with, which is insane. Like, all men are pigs, but women are equal to men. It's like the non sequitur leftism.
No, there's no such thing as men and women, but women are got to be equal to something.
Gender is a social construct, but there is structural sexism. So, which is it? They can't both be true.
I want to say, if you think that you've tuned into a seminary discussion on end times, this is actually a political blog.
Hey, folks, you just tuned into 3D Politics. If you're just now getting here, I'm Tom McKay, your host. I got all three Davids from Oklahoma that matter: David Van, David Oldham, David D'Ambroso. Find out more information on David Van from SoonerPolitics.org. Everything you need to know, state politics. ConstitutionalGrounds.com with David Oldham for all your in-depth studies of Constitution and constitutionality. And, of course, at Dave D'Ambroso on Facebook for all the witty comments. You can always contact me right here at 3D Live, 3D Politics Live. I just got to say that this contagion thing really leans into how we tap into the psychology of getting people to be inspired and hopeful about it, building back a constitutional republic.
Well, we got to take.
You got to sell hope and change.
Yeah.
No, it's true.
You've got to take action. I had to sit on myself not to segue when Oldham was talking about actually getting involved in doing something.